A lot of people out there, a lot of people. But let me begin by thanking Progressive Summit here in Pennsylvania for inviting me, and thanking my fellow Vermonter Jim Dean for that very generous introduction, and for all of the great work that Jim and DFA does. And let me thank all of the folks up here and all of you, because in each one of you in your own way is standing up and fighting for democracy, is fighting to demand that we radically change the political system in America. And I thank you all very much for what you're doing. What I want to do today, this morning, is something that is a little bit unusual. I want to tell the truth. And I also want to talk about politics in a way that, sadly, I think as a nation, we are losing. I'm afraid that for many of the media, what politics is about is a game, not really different than a Super Bowl game, and there is incredible attention paid to the process, to the campaign, to the polling, to what candidates wear or dumb things they say, rather than focusing on the very, very serious issues facing our country. Because at the end of the day, what is politics? What politics, serious politics, is about, which is what you are about, is having the courage to take a hard look at the problems facing our country, have honest debates about those issues, understand that in a democracy, not everybody agrees. That's a good thing. But have a serious debate about issues, not gossip, not personality, and then figure out where we go as a nation and as a world. That's what we have got to do. And that is what I want to do this morning. I'm going to lay it out. Talk about the issues, talk about the problems that I see, and then talk about some solutions. Now, when I talk about the problems that we face in our democracy, let me begin by telling you what you already know, is that the Supreme Court's decision on Citizens United will go down in history as one of the worst decisions ever made by a Supreme Court. And by a 5-4 vote, what the Supreme Court did is undermining the very foundations of American democracy. I, until a couple of months ago, was chairman of the Veterans Committee in the Senate. And I have talked throughout Vermont and throughout this country to many, many thousands of veterans who have put their lives on the line to defend this country. And it saddens me very much to know that their sacrifice is today a political situation where billionaires who not only own the economy are now prepared to buy the United States government, and we must not allow that to happen. Now, I know that you think the situation is bad. In fact, it's worse than you think it is. All right? Koch brothers, as you know, recently announced that they were going to spend some $900 million in the coming election. Maybe they'll spend that, maybe they'll spend more, we don't know. But what you have to understand is the Koch brothers alone are worth $85 billion. 2 years ago, I don't know the latest numbers, their wealth went up by $12 billion in 1 year. So for them to spend $1 billion or $2 billion or $3 billion is like you to spend $100. It doesn't matter. Their resources are literally unlimited. And what happens is, not only are these people prepared to buy elections, but they are also, in a very radical way, working from education to healthcare to taxation to constitutional issues to radically change what America is all about. They are counter-revolutionaries who have an extreme right-wing agenda, which I'm going to talk about in a moment. But I want you to understand that as powerful as they are in the political process, and it may well be the case that they will be more politically powerful than either the Democratic or Republican Party, their agenda goes beyond campaigns. It goes into classrooms. It goes into school boards. It goes into elections about local judges. And we have got to be vigilant in understanding what they want and how we effectively fight back. Another point that I want to make early on is that I understand completely that a whole lot of people are discouraged and demoralized. I understand that. But what I want to tell you, and you know this, is that where we are as a country and the problems that we face were made by human decisions. Weren't made by God or by anybody else. They were made by human beings. And the bad decisions that were made by human beings can be replaced by good decisions by human beings. We can, in fact, address the problems that we face. We can do it. Now, let me talk a little bit about some of the issues that I see in front of me. When we talk about economics, let's go over a few points. Number one, is the economy of the United States of America better today than it was 6 years ago? And the answer is absolutely and positively. When Obama became president, we were losing 800,000 jobs a month. And some of our Republican colleagues and some of us say, well, you know, we're growing 200, 250,000 jobs a month now. Not enough. But let me tell you, growing 250,000 jobs, hell of a lot better than losing 800,000 jobs. 6 years ago, as everybody in this room remembers, as a result of the greed, the recklessness, and the illegal behavior of the, and you can quote me on this, crooks on Wall Street, this country and the world was plunged into the worst economic crisis since the Great Depression of the 1930s. There was some question, according to economists, in fact, whether the financial system would be able to continue. That's how bad it was. Well, right now, as you all know, Wall Street is doing very well, maybe too well, but we are surely not in a financial crisis the likes of which we saw 6 years ago. Now, my Republican colleagues talk a whole lot about the deficit, very worried about deficits. Maybe they shouldn't have voted for the war in Iraq if they were so worried about it. But when Bush left office, the great deficit hawks left us a $1.4 trillion deficit, the largest in the history of America, and we have reduced that deficit by 2/3 in the last 6 years. But here is the point that I want to make about the economy, and I think sometimes some of my Democratic colleagues miss the point. Is the economy better today than it was 6 years ago? Absolutely. But anyone who thinks that this economy today is anywhere near where it should be is terribly mistaken. Good news is that unemployment has gone down, and official unemployment is 5.8%. But let me tell you something that some of you know and some of you don't know. that the government calculates unemployment in different ways, all of which are legitimate. What media picks up is on the official unemployment rate, which is now about 5.7, 5.8%. But there is another analysis done by the Bureau of Labor Statistics, which looks at people who have no jobs, but also people who have given up looking for work, and people who are working part-time when they want to work full-time. That's a serious problem, because many of the new jobs being created are part-time jobs. And when you look at that number, real unemployment in this country today is 11.5%, not 5.8%. Even more frightening is youth unemployment, which we do not talk about at all. You know, talks about it, the Pope talks about it. But in this country, I hear very little discussion in Congress about this serious crisis. Youth unemployment in America today is close to 18%. We talk a lot about Ferguson, as we should, but we don't talk about the fact that African American youth unemployment is 30%. Point being is, yes, we can take pride that we have made progress in the last 6 years, but nobody should be satisfied with where we are today in terms of the economy. Today in America, and again, we don't talk much about this, we have 45 million Americans living in poverty. Poverty, I know that's not a word we talk about, but we should talk about that word. And that is more people living in poverty than almost any time in the history of our country. We as a nation should be thoroughly ashamed when we look at the future of America that the United States today has by far, not close, the highest rate of childhood poverty of any major country on earth. Yes, we have made some gains. 10 million more people have health insurance today because of the Affordable Care Act. That's a good thing. But let us not forget for 1 second that 40 million Americans are still uninsured, and many of you and tens of millions of Americans are paying unaffordably high co-payments, and deductibles are too high, and millions of our people are underinsured. And yet, we remain the only major country on earth that doesn't guarantee health care to all people through a national health care. Now, when we talk about the economy, I think what we have to understand is that in recent years, there has been, as you all know, an explosion in technology. And it's not only iPhones and iPads, and it deals with robotics in factories, it deals with space-age technology. And the bottom line of that explosion in technology is that virtually every worker in America is much more productive than that same worker would have been 20 or 30 years ago. And a very simple economic question to ask ourselves is to say, if I give you a tool that has you producing 30% more than was the case 20 years ago, well, maybe you're going to be earning 30% more, or maybe you're going to be working fewer hours. I mean, that's a logical conclusion if we make workers more productive. But every person in this room knows that despite the explosion in technology and the increase of productivity, tens of millions of Americans are working longer hours for lower wages. Since 1999, median family income in this country has gone down by almost $5,000. Now, for the young people in the room, to show you how old I am, I'm going to tell you about ancient American history. And I know you're not going to believe it, but check it out. Google it. There was once a time in American history, this is true, hard to believe, where one worker in a family could work 40 hours a week and earn enough money to provide well for the family. And I know you don't believe me, but that's really true. So how does it happen? And these are the issues we have got to be thinking about. But how does it happen now in America? You have 70, 80% of women in the workforce. You have men in the workforce. You have people not working 40 hours a week. In Jim's state, in my state, in the state of Vermont, in a rural state, you got huge numbers of people. They don't work one job. They're working 2 jobs, 3 jobs. Talked to a woman a few months ago, literally working 5 jobs, trying to cobble together an income and some health insurance. How did it happen that where one worker can make enough money to take care of the family, we now have 2 workers working incredibly long hours? Those are the kinds of issues we need to be discussing and debating. And then when you talk about the anger and the stress that exists in this country, and people are angry. Sadly, too often, they are angry at the wrong people for the wrong reasons. And that's something we've got to work on. But people are angry, and I'll tell you why they are angry. Today, the male worker, the man, right in the middle of the economy, makes, in inflation-adjusted for dollars, almost $800 less than he made 41 years ago. Today, that median female worker, that woman right in the middle of the economy, makes $1,300 a year less than she made 7 years ago. So people are working. They are stressed out, they're worried about their kids, and they're falling further and further behind. And they want to know why, and our job is to explain it to them. So the point is, yes, we are better than we were 6 years ago. But nobody in this room and nobody in America should be satisfied where our economy is today. Now, at the same time as the middle class continues to disappear, at the same time as we have more people living in poverty than almost any time in American history, there is another phenomenon going on. And this, I think, also rankles the American people. It hurts the American people because it's not what America is supposed to be about. So while the middle class shrinks, the people on top have literally never had it so good, and corporate profits today are at an all-time high. So I think what people understand is if a tornado hits a community, if a flood hits a community, and everybody gets hurt, it is understandable. All right, we're all in this together, how do we rebuild? But what's going on in the economy today is tens of millions of people are being devastated, and yet people on top are doing better than they have ever done before. Today, in terms of distribution of wealth, this country has more inequality than at any time since 1929, and you all know what happened during that year, and that's not coincidental. Today, the top 1/10 of 1%, 1/10 of 1% owns more wealth than the bottom 90%. Today in America, the Walton family of Walmart, one family, owns more wealth than the bottom 40% of American people. One family. Today, in terms of income, that's wealth, in terms of income, what we made last year, since the Wall Street crash of 2008, 99% of all new income generated goes to the top 1%. Today you have a situation where just last year, 25 hedge fund managers earned more income than 425,000 public school teachers. In other words, while the middle class shrinks, while elderly people make decisions in Vermont and around this country about whether or not they're going to heat their homes in the winter, buy the food they need, buy the medicine they need, those are the decisions they are making. People on top are doing phenomenally well. And this issue of income and wealth inequality is, to me, the major moral issue, the major economic issue, and the major political issue of our time. Why is it a moral issue? It is a moral issue because as a nation we have got to determine as to whether or not we are comfortable living in a country which is seeing a proliferation of millionaires and billionaires at the same time as we have millions of people in our country who are hungry and sleeping out on the street. We have got to determine from a moral perspective whether we find acceptable CEOs on Wall Street making huge amounts of money at the same time as millions of young people are finding it hard to afford to go to college. Is that the nation that we want to be? And that's the moral dynamic, whether we are comfortable in a nation where so few have so much and so many have so little. But it's not just a moral issue, it becomes an economic issue. And let me tell you how it becomes an economic issue. As all of you know, about 70% of our gross domestic product, the GDP, is based on consumer spending. Now, my Republican colleagues like to talk about CEOs of large corporations as being the job creators. Great heroes and heroines, they are the job creators. Well, they are dead wrong. You know who is the job creators? You are the job creators. The working families of America are the job creators. The bottom line is that you cannot create jobs and have a strong economy unless the vast middle class has the revenue, has the income, has the wages to go out and spend and buy products and buy services. And if working people do not have disposable income, they're not spending money. If they're not spending money, we are not creating jobs. So if you want to rebuild our economy, our job is to create policies which put money into the hands of working people. And lastly, in terms of income and wealth inequality, it's a moral issue, it's an economic issue. It is, because of Citizens United, a political issue. These people are making huge sums of money, whether it's the Koch brothers or the people around the Chamber of Commerce or the Business Roundtable. They're not putting their money under their mattresses. What they are saying is, gee, top 0.1%, we own more wealth than the bottom 90%. That's not good enough. We need more and more. And I have to tell you, my observation of these people is that they are very, very religious people. Their religion is greed. Now, one might think, using the Koch brothers as an example, that if you were worth $85 billion, that might be enough to get you by for the next couple of years. What motivates people who have that incredible wealth to spend hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars to destroy Social Security and Medicare and other programs? It really, to me, and you're going to laugh, but I mean this seriously, I think you are looking at a psychiatric issue of people who are addicted to money. We all know people who have problems with alcohol, who have problems with drugs. These people have a problem, and there is not enough Not enough. They need more and more, and if they have to destroy this entire country to get it, that is their addiction. Now, I want to say something about my good friends, the Koch brothers. Who no doubt are going to significantly fund my campaign. The media, we know the Koch brothers, and the media talks about the Koch brothers, and they're referred to as conservatives, interesting people, small government people. Well, we have had a very, very hard job getting out through the mainstream media. In fact, we have not succeeded. That's a whole other story itself. Is who are the Koch brothers? What do they stand for? Now, you would think that if arguably the most important political force in America trying to buy elections, one would ask the simple question, what do they want? Who are they? So let me think a little bit about them, because it is important to understand this. If you were to ask me what the most significant political development in the last 30 or 40 years is, this is what I would tell you. I would tell you that 40 years ago we had two political parties, major political parties, Democrats and Republicans. The Republican Party was what we would call a center-right party, conservative party. In my state of Vermont, they were not so right. We had people, Republican governors and senators who actually believed in the environment, believed in women's rights and so forth, but more or less you had a center-right party. Dwight D. Eisenhower comes to mind. Over the last 40 years, what has happened to that party, it has moved from being a center-right party to being a right-wing extremist party. And that is, to my mind, one of the most significant political developments in recent years. And the Democratic Party, which under Roosevelt, under Truman, was considered to be the party of the American working class, a center-left party, has, as a result of corporate influence, become more of a centrist party rather than a party of American workers. That's the reality. Whole shift to the right. Now, how did that happen? What I want to do now is just to take one moment to tell you what you may not know. And that is, back in 1980, David Koch ran for vice president of the United States on the Libertarian Party. Okay? And he didn't do well. That party only got 1% of the vote. And their platform at that point in 1980 was really thought to be kind of kooky and kind of fringy and kind of crazy. The frightening development of the Koch brothers over the last 35 years is what then was considered to be crazy is now mainstream Republican. Now I want to read you a little bit of the platform that David Koch ran on 35 years ago, where he got 1% of the vote. You tell me where those ideas are today. First issue, in terms of, I'm going to read exactly from their platform, word for word. Quote, David Koch, 1980 Libertarian Party platform. We urge the repeal of federal campaign finance laws and the immediate abolition of the despotic Federal Election Commission. End of quote. You know where we are today? For the Republican leadership, by the way, Citizens United did not go far enough. You all understand that? Citizens United forces the Koch brothers to put independent expenditures out there. They can't give millions directly to a candidate. The leadership of the Republican Party now is on record. They want all of that gone, all campaign finance restrictions gone. They want to be in a position, and they're moving that direction, where the Koch brothers and other billionaires can sit in a room like this and say, you want to run for the Senate from Colorado? Here's your check directly for $50 million. There's your campaign manager. There's your media person. There's your speechwriter. You work for